data is very important. We all know that. We've been hearing that data is the new oil, and with AI, artificial intelligence, we know the importance of data. So for us, it is important to be conversant that the governments do release a lot of data. It's not just private agencies, and most of this data is used in policy making. That means decisions that affect you and me, our lives of citizens of this country are made using this data. So it is important for all of us to interact with data in whichever capacity possible. So wherever you're advocating for issues, wherever you're talking about an issue that you're deeply interested in, always start understanding what kind of data may be available and start using such data. So broadly, we have these types of data. One is the census data. The census, as you know, is the foremost exercise of counting. It could be demographics, it could be characteristics of households, because census forms the bedrock of a lot of policy making. So it forms the baseline. So every 10 years, we have a decadal census. So apart from the census, we actually have 3 broad census exercises and multiple other census. So one is obviously the main census, which is about people, which is about households, you and me, which happens every 10 years. There is a livestock census, which is supposed to happen every 4 years. The livestock census, as the name suggests, is all about livestock. They count animals, they count. Thirdly, there is an agricultural census, which happens every 4 to 5 years. Agricultural census is all about land holdings. So what kind of land holdings, who owns these lands, what kind of agriculture is being practiced, what are the irrigation facilities. So think of it more like from the land point of view. So what I'll try and do in the next 35-40 minutes is to, through some examples, make you understand how a lot of times things that seem very simple on the outside in terms of the data that is released by the government is not so simple. So while data, as you know, is very, very important to make a lot of decisions, and certainly the policy decisions that impact all of us, it is also important for common citizens to understand the nuances so that we understand the data and we also contribute to that larger issue of policy making. And the reason I say I use government data and public data interchangeably, because most public data and most data on which policies are made, on which decisions are taken, is usually data released by the government or by multilateral institutions. So my talk will focus on the government data itself. So I'll begin by, so how do we make sense of it? So I know that there are quite a few steps that I've listed here, but I'll not go through all of them. So for instance, this is a standing committee report of the Parliament, the Committee on Privileges. It's in the public domain from 2017. Now, why are we talking about a Committee on Privileges? So I'll just start with a picture. So in 2017, this was published by a leading newspaper on their front page. Now, on the outside, it looks like a very good news item, that it was highlighting the attendance or the lack of it by elected members of parliament, because we elect them to go and represent us in the highest policy making bodies of India. Now, while it looks like, okay, this is a very good news item, and what is the controversy around it? Now, the issue was not with the intent or what it was saying. The issue was how the data was used. So for instance, the one who wrote this story, whoever penned this story for that particular media agency, so we all use spreadsheets and let's say Excel. So that particular person sorted the attendance column by lowest to highest, but forgot to sort the name column. So what happened was, all those people who had the lowest attendance, their name started with A, while in reality their attendance was much higher. So these people were in some way shamed on national television. A lot of vernacular media took it up, because local media in various states where these MPs come from, and they were taken to cleaners. So you're getting a salary, you're elected by our votes, and you're simply staying there. And all this led to these members of parliament actually going and making a complaint to the Privileges Committee that we have very good attendance and this is all false. We are being criticized for for no fault of ours. So the matter is the Privilege Committee. Privilege Committee is one of the highest standing committees of the Parliament. So it made an entire report. What I wanted to highlight with this example is, while data is a very glamorous thing, because a lot of us talk about data today, anybody who talks about data is seen with a sense of respect. The one who is speaking knows what he's speaking about. But data is always a double-edged sword, and this example exemplifies that it is not adequate, or it is not enough if you just have the data with you. It is important that you take care of how you present it, how you understand it, because what all can go wrong can go wrong. While you make a very opinion piece, a rhetorical statement, fine, nobody is asking you for evidence for it because it's your opinion. But when you are making emphatic statements with data, it is very, very important that you understand what you're speaking about. And all through my examples, I'll try and highlight these nuances that I'm not saying each citizen has the time and effort, time and resources to understand these nuances, but we can always make an effort. So especially if those of you who want to interact with such government data, it is very important that you start understanding these nuances. So let me start with the types of public data. So, the government releases a lot of data, something that unimaginable kind of data. So a lot of times we hear extreme opinions from people. One side, there is a section which says government does not release anything. On another side, which thinks that government has everything about us. The answer lies somewhere in between. The government does not have everything you ask for. There is no wish list. While at the same time, the government does have a lot of data, and that does release a lot of data. So broadly, we have these types of data. One is the census data. The census, as you know, is the foremost exercise of counting. It could be demographics, it could be characteristics of households, because census forms the bedrock of a lot of policy making. So it forms the baseline. So every 10 years, we have a decadal census. Right from 1951, we had up to 2011. Because of COVID, the latest census got delayed, and hopefully it will begin soon. So apart from the census, we actually have 3 broad census exercises and multiple other census. So one is obviously the main census, which is about people, which is about households, you and me, which happens every 10 years. There is a livestock census, which is supposed to happen every 4 years, but it is not done as frequently as regularly as the original census. The livestock census, as the name suggests, is all about livestock. They count animals, they count this one. Thirdly, there is an agricultural census, which happens every 4 to 5 years. Agricultural census is all about land holdings. So what kind of land holdings, who owns these lands, what kind of agriculture is being practiced, what are the irrigation facilities. So think of it more like from the land point of view. In addition to these are the 3 main census. In addition to these, there are one-off census that happen. So for example, there was a handloom census recently, trying to understand what is the status of handlooms in India. There was a lake census recently, so to understand the status of lakes in the country. So once in a while, occasionally, the census other than the normal census do happen, but they're not very regular. But these 3 are regular and going. So since census happen not regularly, not every year, every 10 years, every 5 years, it is very difficult for governments to wait for the census data to make decisions, because you have a baseline, you want to see how impactful your policies were, and you want to make decisions based on those policies. Let's say take corrective actions. So which is why governments can't wait for census, which is why they do something called as surveys. So the National Sample Survey Office or the National Statistical Office, there is a ministry called the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation at the Government of India level. So this ministry is in charge of conducting these surveys. So surveys are not like census. They don't cover every household. They take a sample, a randomized scientific sample, and extrapolate these results to cover the entire country. So the National Sample Survey Office releases these surveys every once in a while. Every year they do a survey on different issue. So they cover major issues like consumer expenditure, travel patterns, education, work. There is a periodic labor force survey which talks about worker participation rate. So there is a host of topics these surveys cover, because these surveys are very important data points for the governments and others to understand where we are and to make relevant action. While census forms the bedrock of our baseline, these surveys also are very important. There are also other surveys like the National Family Health Survey, for instance, which is done every 3 to 4 years, which captures a lot of indicators related to health, family and household. And they also become very important markers. In addition to these, there is a lot of administrative data that is released, and so as part of the routine administrative work, government creates a lot of data. So let's say there is a welfare scheme that is being implemented. Now, as part of the welfare scheme, you will have data on beneficiaries, where they come from, how much amount was given to them, or there is file movement, there is tax collection data. So all these become part of the routine administrative data born out of the routine administrative work of the government, both at the central and state levels. Then there is regulatory data. As you know, we have a host of regulatory institutions set up to regulate certain kind of activities like SEBI, like TROI, for various purposes. And they have a lot of regulatory data because they want to understand how well the regulated entities are doing. So you will have a lot of data that is submitted to regulatory agencies, and these regulatory agencies quite often release this data. So for instance, if I take the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is the body for all issues related to telecom, they release a host of reports every quarter where they talk about penetration of internet, penetration of telephone connections, quality of calls, who holds how much market share in private companies, and so on and so forth. So on their website, you will find a host of regulatory data. Then compliance data. Compliance is mostly, there could be some overlap with regulatory, but compliance data is mostly if there is a rule, if there is a law that private entities or government entities have to comply with. And that data which is submitted to the government agencies becomes part of compliance data. So for instance, if the pollution control boards regulate a lot of industries which fall into certain categories, and they're supposed to regularly submit their pollution related data, the emissions data. Then there is something called as the BRSR framework, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Framework, where the top 1,000 companies in terms of market share on the stock market are supposed to submit in a pre-specified template a lot of data related to sustainability and their business responsibility. So this is submitted to the stock market, the BSE and the NSE. So all these can be termed as compliance data. Then there is transactional data. So every time you and I make a transaction, there is data that is automatically created. So this we can term as, one good example is all the digital payments that we do become part of the transactional data. Same is the case with you're traveling somewhere, you go to a toll booth and automatically FASTag, you use a FASTag. It becomes transactional data. Then there are indices and rankings. So governments over time have started releasing a lot of indices. So if you look at the NITI Aayog website, they release a lot of indices. For example, there is a multidimensional poverty index. They release it once in a while. Then they have released multiple indices with relate to states and rankings with states. While these are not primary data, these rankings and indices are made possible or made looking at all the other primary data. Now, I'm not saying there is no data outside of this, but most of the data can be bucketed into one of these groups. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight here is there is a variable level of accuracy and trust that we can have with these kinds of data. So when I say, which data out of these is the most accurate, I would obviously say transactional data, because there is very little manual intervention there. So there is technology, somebody is automatically capturing. Not to say it is always 100% accurate, but out of all the things, relatively. Data from surveys and any data that is collected by a human, that is entered by a human, is always prone to errors. So whenever you're looking at such data, especially surveys, you have to take them with a pinch of salt. So, whenever there are extremes. So for example, the other day there was a report around the recently released the periodic labor force survey where statistically speaking, the weight of one village in Assam was overdone, so because of which a lot of data about Assam and about the country was skewed, which in the later report was okay. So, that is a nuance that people understanding those things will make out. So my advice would be, when you are looking at data that is not complete, in the sense not covered 100%, or where there is a lot of manual intervention, I'm not saying don't believe that data, but we always have to be careful not to extrapolate and understand this could be all right? It is always good to question, because what may be right with this data, what may be wrong with this data. So for instance, if you look at this chart, the data comes from the National Crime Records Bureau, which is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So this is the premier body that is in charge of collecting all the crime related data in India. So they get their data from the state governments, they further who get their data from the district crime records bureau, and they compile and release 3 different reports. So one is called the Crime in India report. It's an annual publication. The second is called Accidents and Suicides in India. It's called the ADSI report. Then there is a third report called Prisoners in India. So there are 3 reports that are released by this agency. Coming back to this slide, we all know that if you look at this, there is a sudden jump in the number of cases that were registered with Delhi police of rape between 2012 and 2013. Now we all know what could be the reason behind this, which is this gruesome incident of the Nirbhaya incident happened around that time. So which essentially tells us that it is not as if crimes actually or crimes related to rape did not actually double from 2000, more than double from 2012 to 2013, but reporting may have improved because of the awareness that happened as a result of what happened in the Nirbhaya case. So as you see, then there is an output trajectory. So does it mean that the data before 2012, does it not accurately represent the issue of crime on ground? That is what we need to understand. So this data only comes from the police, which means anybody who approaches the police for registering a case, only that data is captured. So there could be crimes or there could be incidents which don't come to the police station, which are not captured, right? So which is clearly explained by another slide that I will show you. So if you look at this slide, for example, while you see the murder cases in those 2 years in Delhi remained constant. So if crime had actually doubled, then it should have reflected in all kinds of crime, not just in one crime, but murder cases remained more or less same. Again, kidnapping and abduction cases almost doubled, which essentially means a lot of that increase that we are seeing in that 2 years was because of an increased awareness about reporting crimes and not you can go to the police, you can report, and police had a duty to register your case. Now, which again comes back to the point that whatever data is reported by the NCRB does not always reflect the actual situation on ground, but reflects only data that comes to the police. So quite often, unfortunately, we see headlines like these in newspapers, which we tend to read once in a while and come to certain conclusions. Maharashtra leads, tailed by UP, Delhi top city, or sometimes we see that cities are even ranked by their safety indices. This is the safest city because crimes are low. This is not the safest city because crimes are high, etc., etc. Now, please understand, all these are coming from numbers in the NCRB. Now, coming to those conclusions based on NCRB numbers is not the right thing to do because, like I said, these numbers are only those that are reported in the police station. So, and secondly, for example, in this case, taking absolute numbers and comparing states and cities is not the right thing to do because all our states are not of equal size, especially in terms of population. So, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, which has more than 20 crore population, you can't compare it with a Kerala or a Telangana or an Andhra, which is 1/4, 1/5 of that population. So, if you want to just count absolute crime, UP will always be on the top because the population is 20 crore. But that's not the right way to do. So normalization is something that we need to do, which again, quite often in the popular discourse, it does not happen. So these two, in fact, graphs will further explain. Again, this is from NCRB. So if you look at this is again normalized. When I say normalized, crimes per lakh population. So, even if the population of one state is high, one state is low, it does not matter. We are comparing on a scale of population, crimes per every 1 lakh. Now, if you see on the left one, murder rate, on the right is rate of stalking. Both come from the NCRB data. Now, there is a distinct difference in these two. There are states which are showing a high rate of murder, but they are showing a very low rate of stalking, and vice versa. If you closely observe some states. Now, what does this mean? A murder is a crime that can't be hidden. 99 out of 100 murders will get reported to the police, which means there is a high probability that every murder gets into police records. Whereas every case of stalking may not get into police records. It depends on the victim whether they're willing to go and report it to the police, and only then makes an entry in the police. So while we are discussing crime, it is important to understand that. Secondly, again, these are some headlines that I wanted to show you because this is what we always read, but these are not the reflection of those numbers. Those numbers actually don't reflect what is being said. Then another important thing, so this is from that report, the NCRB report. You open the NCRB report, you'll find this page. So in the limitation section, what they say is, so like with every other country in the world, and it's not unique to India, they follow something called as the principal offense rule. So what is the principal offense rule? A crime can have, so for example, if there is, in the Nirbhaya case, for instance, the crime was rape, which led to murder, which led to the death of the victim, which means it is both a case of rape and a case of murder, right? So the NCRB counts in such a way that the principal offense rule simply means the most heinous crime will be counted as the counting unit. So earlier in the IPC, in the Indian Penal Code, which is now replaced by the BNS, we had section 302, which is murder, section 376, which is rape. So a murder case, which also had rape, will only be counted as a murder case because that is a more heinous crime and that carries a larger punishment than case of rape. So this is how it is counted, which means this is done to avoid double counting, which is a practice followed across the world, not unique to India. But this does bring in a great limitation in understanding these numbers. So which means a lot of crime data that we are seeing may not actually represent the count of crime under that head. So for example, a kidnapping case, which also led to some other crime, which is more heinous, will get counted in that category and not in the category of kidnapping. So the NCRB in its report itself clearly says, don't use this data to come to conclusions like these, because these are certain limitations. And when you're dealing with numbers like these, it is important for you to understand these limitations. So unless you understand these limitations, you will make very simplistic assertions, which is not the right thing to do. So in fact, they very clearly say any comparison among states, districts, regions, social groups on the basis of these published data alone will be too simplistic and is best avoided. This is from the report itself. So they themselves are saying, while these numbers are important to understand the state of crime, these are not to be taken as the state of crime on the ground and simplistically comparing one region or one state with another, etc. So what I wanted to tell with this is, it is important to understand definitions on what data means, how it is collected, and what are the limitations of the data that is being put in the public domain. Secondly, I'm sure most of you have seen these graphs. Again, this is an old one, NFHS 4, but NFHS 5 is also same. These go viral on social media because alcohol, as a topic is widely discussed and debated. While it looks like there are certain states which are there are a lot of people who often drink alcohol, and it looks like there is a problem of addiction in certain states. Now, what is often missed is this comes from the National Family Health Survey. Again, one of the things that you need to remember is it's a survey. More importantly, the problem with this is the data comes from here. So if you go through in detail of the data, so if you look at the data, so this data includes those people who may have said in response to the survey that they drink less than once a week. So half of them who are counted as people who drink alcohol, or people who may have said, so if the question is, have you consumed alcohol any time in your life? If I say yes, have you consumed alcohol in the last week or every week? No. Then you will be counted as somebody who consumed alcohol. Second issue with this is the question that was asked. So this is the actual question from the survey. So what type of alcohol do you drink? Do we drink alcohol? How often? What kind of alcohol? So we know that in a lot of states there is traditional cultural alcohol that comes from trees, date palm, and at least in the south where I live, there you go to any village of Telangana, toddy is a big thing. It has some people say it has some medicinal value. A lot of people consume toddy. It is not treated as, of course, any excess drinking is harmful and adulterated one is harmful, but a lot of people consume it. It is not treated as alcohol as such. But in the survey, when you are asked and prompted that, have you consumed 1, 2, 3 these, then it will be treated. So it is important to understand what led to this data. So while we can simply say, okay, fine, there could be a headline saying 30% of India is addicted to alcohol, or 54% in Telangana, or 59% in Arunachal, and so on and so forth. It's important to understand those are very, very simplistic assertions that we should best avoid. Same is the case with we are in the midst of a very which seems like a very hot summer, and every summer we have discussions around heat waves and how it affects people. One of the things with government agencies and public data is multiple agencies release the same kind of data, at least count the same kind of data, and there could be occasions where the data of one agency may not match with the data of another agency. So especially on the heat waves front. So for example, if you look at number of deaths in India due to heat waves, and this issue of numbers not matching is continuing. The NDMA, which is the National Disaster Management Agency, which is the premier disaster management authority in the country, gives one number which does not match with a number given by the Ministry of Statistics, which in turn is taken from the Ministry of Environment. Then there is the NCRB's accidental deaths and suicides report, which also gives data on natural or unnatural accidents, and heat wave is considered a natural accident. So they give one data. Then the WMO is the World Meteorological Organization, which is the environmental agency. Now you might wonder why the same agencies under the same government are giving different kinds of data, which of course does not lead to any kind of conclusion or people who are analyzing this. This comes because each of them has their own definition of what is a heat wave, what is a heat wave death. So NCRB, for instance, their data primarily comes from the police. So only when a police records a death as being due to heat waves, it gets into the record. Whereas NDMA and MOSPI have different definitions. So because of these definitional changes, definitional differences, we see these kinds of data. But this is I'm not saying it's a common phenomenon, but in many cases you will find that the same kind of data released by two different government agencies may not always match, and this is primarily because of the differences in the definition. So we also know, for instance, this debate about federalism. Some states which say we gave a lot of funds to the center, we are not getting back adequately enough. Whereas the government of India says, no, we have given you enough. This debate continues. Now, the difference is not in the numbers. Both state and central governments may agree on the numbers. If I have given you 100 crores, the state might say, yes, I received 100 crores. The debate here is more about the nature of transfers and how they should be, and the quantum of transfers as envisaged by the Finance Commission and other schemes. So sometimes it is not just about hard data. Hard data, is just numbers. But what is driving the debate around hard data is something that you need to understand. So one of the very important data sources are the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha websites, which are the highest policy-making bodies of India, democratic India. So the upper house and the lower house. So every member of parliament has the authority and power to ask questions to the government on the floor of the house, and the government is duty bound to answer those questions. And most of these questions contain very important public information and public data. So if you go to the relevant Lok Sabha and the Rajya website, you will see a lot of these. I'll just open one to show you what it means. So this is the Lok Sabha website, and in the business section, you will have questions and answers. So when you go to the questions and answers, you will find a lot of filters and all. So this is the subject of the question. So for example, water supply to Chandrapur city. So this is asked by a member, Pratibha Suresh. Then what about some NH? What about open sky agreement? What about speed monitoring? So these questions are asked, and the government does give answers. So I'll open one of the questions just to show you how it looks like. So this question about water supply to Chandrapur city was asked by Srimati Pratibha Suresh to the Ministry of Jal Shakti, and this was the answer. So a lot of times important information and data is given. So we'll pick up something that has data. Funds for PMKSY, Pradhan Krishi Sinchai Yojana. So distributed funds, about this state-wise funds. So the government says this is what we have given, and you will find a lot of important data. So for example, from the year 14-15, under this scheme, we have given so many funds to each of these states. So the question was about 3 states, which is why you find data for 3 states. The question was about, if it's a generic question, you will find, so for example, status of Har Ghar Nal scheme, you'll find that there is no data here. So let me find something here. Let's say on-time performance of airlines. So this is a question about on-time performance of airlines. The government gives this data. So twice, what is on-time performance of different airlines? A lot of important data is shared by the government in response to questions asked by members of parliament, and you will find them in the question and answers. So same is the case with the Rajya Sabha website. You'll also find a section called questions and answers. You can find it. Okay, I'll go back to the slideshow. Then there are annual reports of ministries. So in the government of India, every ministry and department, they release annual reports at the end of the year detailing their work. So in that, you will find a lot of achievements, what activities did they undertake in that year, and any data related to the work of the ministry. Some ministries also release monthly statistics, like the Ministry of Tourism does a monthly bulletin. The Ministry of Commerce does a monthly bulletin. So in that monthly bulletin, they will talk about what is the major activity of that ministry. The Ministry of Tourism in their monthly bulletin does tourism statistics, the footfalls, etc., etc. Then there are some daily releases. So for example, the AQI data, air quality index is released daily. Digital transactions data is released daily by the RBI. So some data is also released at a daily. Then many government departments have dashboards. So you'll find, especially for major schemes, you'll find dashboards where you can go and interact with them and find relevant data. Then there are data portals set up by the government where data is given in more clean formats. There is a data.gov.in portal, which is managed by the Ministry of IT. Then there is NDAP, National Data Analytics Portal by the NITI Aayog. Then there is a DBIE portal, database of the Reserve Bank of India, where a lot of financial data is shared. And like I was telling you earlier, the 4 types of census, the population census, the agricultural census, the livestock census, and the handloom census, you'll find here. Then there are surveys that I was talking about. There are National Sample Survey reports, the All India Survey on Higher Education, which is the go-to report for all higher education in the country, the National Family Health Survey. Then there are other surveys that talk about different issues. Then there are annual surveys also. There is an annual survey of industries which talks about factories. Then there's a quarterly employment survey. National accounts data is about GDP. The NCRB reports that I was talking about. Then there are reports of the CACP for minimum support price. So how much should be the minimum support price for these reports take multiple factors into consideration and come up with a recommendation for the government. Ministry of Railways has a lot of statistical reports. In fact, very interesting is if you are interested, the Ministry of Railways railways have something called as pink books. So pink books are nothing but the railway administration in the country is divided into zones and divisions, as you know very well. Every zone publishes a list of search for it. Yeah. So they publish a laundry list of all the works that will be undertaken by that zone in the particular year. So a lot of railway works which may be of relevance to us, of importance to us. Let's say it could be a small railway overbridge to a track, etc. They're all detailed in these reports. They're called pink books, and they are publicly available on the Ministry of Railways website. You can search for pink books. Then at the state level, you will have, similar to Ministry of Statistics, there is a Directorate of Economics at the state level. So most states have this. You'll find some data there. Then there are state archives, state gazettes in most states. Then there is for education, especially school education, the universal, the UDICE data, the district information school education reports. Then there are all large schemes which have outlay of hundreds of crores, thousands of crores. They have their own scheme-specific websites, so you can go through those websites and get a lot of data. Then there are dashboards, CM and PM dashboards, and of course there are parliamentary standing committee reports, which again the one that I showed you earlier in the example. So you'll find a lot of such reports on the Parliament website, both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. And a lot of regulators, like I was telling you, release data. So a lot of data about air travel is released by the Director General of Civil Aviation, who is the regulator for air travel in the country. They release monthly data on travelers, airports, airport-wise traffic, the on-time performance and delays, cancellations. So number of passengers affected by cancellations, what was the compensation given, all these are released by the DGCA. Similarly, railways, they used to publish monthly reports. I think they stopped, but they do have annual reports, right? So likewise, there are multiple reports across the government. So a lot of times we'll be overawed, by the sheer quantum and amount of data and information that is out in the public domain. But unfortunately, a lot of this is not easily accessible, in the sense you cannot readily use it. So you'll have to maybe do one is access. You have to be aware of what it is, one, where it is available, two, and thirdly, to be able to use it for analysis, you might have to put some effort in terms of making it cleaning it, standardizing it, so on and so forth. But broadly, what I'll end by saying that data is very important. We all know that. We've been hearing that data is the new oil, and with AI, artificial intelligence, we know the importance of data. So for us, it is important to be conversant that the governments do release a lot of data. It's not just private agencies, and most of this data is used in policy making. That means decisions that affect you and me, our lives of citizens of this country, are made using this data. So it is important for all of us to interact with data in whichever capacity possible. So wherever you're advocating for issues, wherever you're talking about an issue that you're deeply interested in, always start understanding what kind of data may be available and start using such data. I think that will go a long way in building a society where we're not just talking about issues that we are very attached to, but we are using data so that the advocacy becomes all the more strengthened. Thank you.